Most people think a strong mind is built by pushing harder every day. But what if the very habits that seem to make you stronger are slowly wearing you down instead? The greatest battles are often invisible, starting long before the world asks anything from you. Ancient wisdom points to a different path, one that does not rely on force, endless effort, or perfect control. If you can see this hidden pattern, you may discover a kind of strength that no setback, fear, or uncertainty can easily break. Long before the world asks anything of you, the mind has already begun its work. The room is still quiet. The sky has not yet decided whether it will welcome the day or hold on to the night a little longer. Yet somewhere inside, a conversation has already started. Thoughts rush ahead to unfinished tasks, difficult conversations, unexpected problems that have not happened, and futures that exist only in imagination. The body has barely awakened, but the mind has been running for hours. This quiet beginning has become so familiar that most people no longer notice it. They call it responsibility. They call it preparation. They believe they are simply getting ready for another day. Yet beneath that routine lies something far less obvious. Before a single challenge appears, an invisible struggle is already consuming energy that can never be recovered. It is easy to believe that exhaustion comes from heavy workloads, difficult people, or unexpected hardships. Those things certainly leave their mark, but if you watch carefully, another pattern begins to emerge. Some people face enormous burdens and remain surprisingly calm. Others are overwhelmed by ordinary days that seem harmless from the outside. The difference is rarely found in the world around them. It begins in the silent space where every moment is measured against how it should have been, instead of how it is. Without realizing it, the mind creates an endless negotiation with reality. The traffic should move faster. The weather should be different. People should understand us without explanation. Success should arrive sooner. The past should have unfolded another way. Even our own emotions become something to argue with. We tell ourselves we should not feel anxious, should not feel tired, should already be stronger than we are. Each expectation seems small on its own, hardly worth noticing, yet together they form a constant current pulling against the natural flow of life. It is like trying to swim upstream all day without understanding why every movement feels heavier than the last. The water is not attacking you. The river is simply moving as rivers always have. The struggle begins the moment you decide it should move differently. This battle is almost invisible because it hides inside ordinary thoughts. There are no alarms, no dramatic moments, no clear beginning. It appears as a sigh when plans change, a tightening in the chest when someone disagrees, a restless glance toward tomorrow before today has even been lived. Little by little, the mind spends its strength arguing with moments that cannot be persuaded. Perhaps that is why so many people look strong while quietly carrying a deep weariness no one else can see. They continue to work, they continue to smile. They meet every responsibility expected of them. From the outside, they appear resilient. Yet peace has become strangely unfamiliar. Silence feels uncomfortable. Rest brings guilt instead of relief. Even moments of success vanish quickly because the mind has already found the next problem waiting in the distance. The strange part is that the world encourages this habit. We are praised for constant vigilance. We admire those who never stop pushing, never stop planning, never stop controlling every possible outcome. Few people ask what this endless effort is costing. Fewer still notice that the greatest fatigue often comes not from action, but from resistance hidden beneath action. Thousands of years ago, a quiet observer noticed something that remains just as true today. He watched rivers carve valleys without force. He watched trees survive storms not by standing rigid but by bending with the wind. He saw that nature rarely wasted energy fighting what could not be changed. Yet human beings possessed a remarkable talent for creating battles where none were necessary. That observer was Lao Tzu. He did not begin by asking how people could become mentally tougher. He did not promise a life free from difficulty, nor did he search for ways to overpower every obstacle. Instead, his attention rested on a question so simple that it often escapes the modern mind. Why are we fighting so many things that were never our enemies? At first, the question feels almost unsettling. After all, resistance can seem responsible. It can feel like strength. If we stop pushing against life, would we become passive? Would we lose ambition? Would we simply accept everything without change? These fears arise naturally because the mind has learned to confuse struggle with progress. Yet there is another possibility waiting just beneath those assumptions. What if much of our suffering is created long before real problems appear? What if the greatest drain on the mind is not the weight of life itself, but the endless habit of arguing with its unfolding? That possibility changes everything. It quietly shifts attention away from the world and back toward the place where every experience is first created. Not in circumstances, not in other people, but within the invisible habits of the mind itself. Lao Tzu never tried to create stronger fighters. He offered something far more unusual. He showed that the deepest strength often appears the moment unnecessary battles come to an end. The first battle of the day is rarely fought in the outside world. It begins in the brief space between waking and rising, before your feet touch the floor, before the first word is spoken, before the day has revealed anything about itself. In those quiet moments, the mind often rushes ahead as if it has already decided that peace can wait until everything else is finished. A single thought appears, and another quickly follows. There is too much to do. There is not enough time. Someone may disappoint me today. Something might go wrong. Yesterday is still unfinished. Tomorrow is already demanding attention. Within seconds, the day has become a problem to solve instead of a life to experience. Most people believe they are preparing themselves. It feels responsible to think ahead. It feels wise to anticipate difficulty. Yet the mind rarely notices the price it pays for beginning each morning in conflict with hours that have not even arrived. By the time breakfast is finished, much of its quiet strength has already been spent on imagined conversations, imagined failures, and imagined futures. What follows is almost inevitable. Decisions become hurried because the mind is already chasing the next moment. Small inconveniences feel larger than they are because patience has been quietly exhausted. Even moments of beauty pass unnoticed. A warm cup of tea cools untouched. Morning light slips across the window without invitation. Birds continue their songs, whether anyone listens or not. Life arrives gently, but attention has already traveled somewhere else. This pattern is so common that it begins to feel normal. Few people pause long enough to wonder if there is another way to meet the day, not by changing their schedule, not by adding another routine, but by changing the position of the mind before anything else begins. Lao Tzu understood that strength is shaped long before it is tested. A river does not wait for a storm to discover its nature. It simply continues to flow according to its own quiet order. In the same way, the first moments of the morning are not empty spaces waiting to be filled with activity. They are the place where the direction of the entire day is quietly chosen. His approach was surprisingly simple, though not always easy. Before trying to shape the day, learn to see it. Before deciding what everything means, notice what is actually here. Before reaching for control, become aware of the one who is reaching. This changes something profound. The morning no longer begins with resistance. It begins with observation. Instead of immediately believing every thought that appears, you simply notice that thoughts are appearing. Instead of rushing to solve problems that may never exist, you allow the day to unfold one moment at a time. The future is no longer carrying all of your attention before the present has even had a chance to speak. This kind of stillness is often misunderstood. It is mistaken for hesitation or lack of ambition. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. Still water reflects clearly because it is undisturbed. A restless surface cannot reveal what lies before it. The same is true of the mind. Calm perception is not the absence of action. It is the beginning of intelligent action. Think about how often a difficult day becomes even more difficult simply because it began with unnecessary tension. A delayed message feels personal. A small mistake becomes proof that everything is falling apart. One unexpected change seems to confirm every fear imagined before sunrise. The events themselves may be ordinary, but the mind receives them through the mood it created hours earlier. Now imagine the opposite. You wake without demanding that the day promise success. You notice your breathing before reaching for distraction. You allow silence to exist without immediately filling it. The sunlight enters the room without needing to symbolize anything. You simply witness another morning arriving, as countless mornings have before it. Nothing magical has happened. The responsibilities remain. The work still waits. The world has not become easier, yet something essential has changed. You are no longer entering the day already at war with it. From that quieter beginning, decisions become clearer because they are not crowded by unnecessary noise. Conversations become more patient because they are not carrying the weight of imagined conflicts. Even setbacks lose some of their power because they meet a mind that has not already exhausted itself through anticipation. Ancient wisdom often appears mysterious because people search for hidden techniques. But many of its deepest insights are remarkably ordinary. They ask us to return to experiences we overlook precisely because they happen every day. The sunrise has never demanded your anxiety before it appears. The morning breeze has never hurried itself to satisfy your plans. Nature begins each day without argument, and in doing so, it preserves its strength. Human beings often do the opposite. We try to live tomorrow before today has even begun. We carry yesterday into the present as though it cannot survive without us. We wake already resisting time itself, then wonder why the mind feels fragile before noon. Perhaps mental strength is not built by adding more discipline to every hour. Perhaps it begins by removing the invisible struggle that quietly drains us before life has even asked anything in return. The first habit is not about doing more. It is about seeing more clearly. Awareness comes before action because clear action grows from a clear mind. When perception settles, choices naturally become wiser. Peace stops being something postponed until the end of the day and quietly becomes the place from which the day begins. And once that quiet foundation is established, another truth slowly reveals itself. Even the calmest morning cannot prevent life from changing its plans. Sooner or later, every path meets interruption. Every expectation meets surprise, and every peaceful beginning is invited into a new kind of test. Sooner or later, the day begins to move according to its own design instead of yours. The carefully arranged schedule changes without warning. A message you were waiting for never arrives. Someone misunderstands your intentions. A door that seemed certain quietly closes. None of these moments ask for permission before they appear. They simply become part of the landscape, reminding us that life has never signed an agreement to match our expectations. It is often these ordinary interruptions, not the great tragedies, that slowly wear down the mind. A traffic jam becomes an insult to our plans. A delayed opportunity feels like a personal injustice. One careless remark from another person echoes through the day long after it was spoken. The event itself lasts only a moment. The struggle against it can continue for hours, sometimes even years. The strange thing is that we rarely resist reality openly. We resist it silently. We replay conversations that cannot be changed. We imagine better versions of yesterday. We negotiate with moments that have already passed. Outwardly, life continues. Inwardly, an invisible argument never reaches its end. This quiet resistance often disguises itself as determination. We tell ourselves we are refusing to give up. We believe we are fighting for what matters, yet beneath much of that effort lies something more fragile than courage. It is the fear that if life unfolds differently than we hoped, something inside us will also fall apart. Control can feel comforting because it promises certainty. If everything happens according to plan, perhaps we can finally relax. If every person behaves as expected, perhaps peace will become possible. If every risk is eliminated, perhaps the mind will stop searching for danger. But certainty has always been a promise the world cannot keep. The seasons never ask whether we are ready before they change. The wind does not seek approval before shifting direction. Rivers do not pause because stones stand in their way. Nature has never confused movement with failure. It simply adjusts without abandoning its course. Lao Tzu saw this truth everywhere he looked. Among all the images he left behind, none is more quietly powerful than water. Water possesses no hardness. Yet it shapes mountains. It never argues with the rocks before it. It does not waste itself demanding that obstacles disappear. It bends, it circles, it slows when necessary. It gathers strength where patience is required. Then, over time, it passes through places that force alone could never conquer. This is not weakness. It is intelligence expressed through flexibility. Human beings often admire the tree that refuses to bend. It appears strong until the storm arrives. When powerful winds meet rigid branches, they break. Nearby, the reeds bow almost to the ground. They seem vulnerable in the moment, yet when the storm has passed, they quietly rise again. The difference was never the storm, it was the response. The mind follows the same law. When every unexpected event is treated as an enemy, resilience begins to disappear. Each disappointment becomes proof that life is unfair. Every criticism becomes an attack on identity. Every change feels like something that must be defeated instead of understood. Rigidity creates a strange kind of weakness. The harder we cling to a single outcome, the more power that outcome gains over our peace. A delayed flight ruins an entire journey. One failed opportunity overshadows 10 quiet successes. The opinion of a stranger begins to shape how we see ourselves. Little by little, emotional stability is handed over to circumstances that were never ours to command. There is another way to meet these moments. Imagine someone walking through a forest after heavy rain. The path they intended to follow has disappeared beneath rising water. One person stands there in frustration, insisting that the trail should not have changed. Minutes become hours as anger grows toward something that cannot hear it. Another person pauses, studies the landscape, and quietly finds another route. Both encountered the same obstacle. Only one carried it long after leaving the forest. Adaptation is not surrender. It is seeing reality clearly enough to move with it instead of against it. This does not mean approving of every disappointment. It does not mean pretending loss does not hurt or injustice does not exist. Taoist wisdom has never asked anyone to deny what they feel. It simply reminds us that pain and resistance are not the same thing. Pain belongs to life. Resistance often belongs to the story we continue telling ourselves about life. That difference changes everything. A difficult conversation may still be uncomfortable. A dream may still take longer than expected. Someone may still choose words that wound more deeply than they realize. Yet when the mind stops demanding that these moments become something else, a surprising amount of strength remains available. Energy, once spent arguing with reality, becomes available for responding to it. Clarity replaces urgency. Patience replaces force. The situation may not improve immediately, but the one meeting the situation has already begun to change. Perhaps this is why people with quiet minds often appear stronger than those who constantly struggle to dominate every circumstance. Their confidence does not depend on controlling tomorrow. It rests on trusting their ability to meet whatever tomorrow brings. This trust cannot be manufactured through positive thinking. It grows slowly. Each time we discover that flexibility protects us more effectively than rigidity ever could. Every unexpected turn becomes evidence that we are capable of adapting. Every imperfect outcome reminds us that peace was never hidden inside perfect conditions. Over time, the need to control begins to loosen its grip, not because life becomes predictable, because we no longer mistake unpredictability for danger, and yet there remains a challenge even greater than changing. Plans are difficult, people. External events eventually pass, but they often awaken something far more powerful within us. A single moment outside can stir a storm inside, where disappointment becomes anger, uncertainty becomes fear, and the greatest struggle is no longer with the world, but with the emotions it leaves behind. A single moment can change the atmosphere of the entire day. One unexpected comment, one disappointing message, one careless glance from another person. The event itself may last only a few seconds, yet something inside immediately begins to move. The heartbeat quickens, the chest tightens, thoughts gather speed. Before long, the mind is no longer seeing the world as it is. It is seeing the world through the emotion that has taken hold. This happens so quickly that it often feels unavoidable. Anger speaks before patience has a chance to appear. Fear writes stories about tomorrow before tomorrow exists. Embarrassment quietly rewrites how we see ourselves. Jealousy turns another person's success into evidence of our own lack. Each emotion arrives with remarkable confidence, convincing us that its version of reality is the only one that can possibly be true. For most of us, there is almost no space between feeling and reacting. An emotion appears, and the reaction follows as naturally as an echo follows a sound. Words are spoken that cannot be taken back. Decisions are made that do not belong to our wiser selves. Hours are spent defending emotions that disappear as quickly as they arrived, leaving behind consequences that remain long after the feeling itself has faded. This is one of the quiet tragedies of the human mind. We mistake passing weather for permanent truth. Stand beside the ocean on a windy afternoon and the surface appears restless. Waves rise without asking permission. Foam races toward the shore. The water seems unable to remain still. Yet beneath that movement, the deeper sea remains almost untouched. Its calm does not disappear simply because the surface has become unsettled. Lao Tzu recognized the same pattern within human nature. Emotions are movement, awareness is depth. The problem is not that emotions exist. They are as natural as changing seasons or passing clouds. Anger tells us something has been crossed. Fear reminds us that uncertainty matters. Sadness reveals what the heart has valued. Joy opens us to gratitude. None of these experiences are mistakes. They are part of being fully alive. Suffering begins when we stop noticing that they are visitors. A visitor enters, and we hand over the keys to the entire house. For a few minutes, or sometimes for years, anger becomes our identity. Fear becomes our personality. Shame becomes the voice through which every experience is interpreted. We no longer say, "I am feeling afraid." Somewhere along the way, it quietly becomes, "I am afraid." The emotion is no longer passing through us. It seems to have become who we are. That subtle change carries enormous weight. If you believe you are your anger, you must protect it. If you believe you are your fear, every uncertainty becomes a threat. If you believe you are your disappointment, hope begins to feel dangerous. Yet something remarkable can happen the moment you simply notice what is taking place. Imagine sitting beside a river instead of standing inside its current. The water continues to flow exactly as before. Leaves drift past. The surface rises and falls. Nothing about the river has changed. What has changed is your relationship to it. You are no longer being carried away by every movement. Awareness creates that same quiet distance. The feeling is still present, the heartbeat may still be faster, the hands may still tremble. But another part of the mind has awakened. It quietly observes, it notices, it remains. This space is small at first, almost impossible to recognize. It may last only a single breath before old habits return. Yet within that brief pause lies one of the greatest forms of freedom available to any human being. Because in that pause, reaction is no longer inevitable. The harsh reply does not have to be spoken. The fearful decision does not have to be made. The impulse loses some of its authority simply because it has been seen. Many people imagine that inner peace means never feeling strong emotions. Ancient wisdom suggests something entirely different. Peace is not the absence of emotional movement. It is the discovery that awareness remains present even while emotions move through it. Think of the sky after a violent storm. Dark clouds may cover every horizon. Thunder may shake the air. Rain may fall with overwhelming force. Yet none of these things damage the sky itself. When the storm has finished, the sky has lost nothing of its nature. The mind possesses that same hidden spaciousness. Though it is rarely recognized, most days attention remains fixed on the clouds. Lao Tzu gently pointed toward the sky. This is why stillness is far more practical than it first appears. It is not an escape from life. It is the place from which life can be met without being ruled by every passing emotion. A still mind does not suppress anger. It notices anger before anger begins directing every action. It does not reject fear. It allows fear to speak without allowing fear to become the only voice that is heard. Slowly, something unexpected begins to emerge. You become less interested in controlling your emotions and more interested in understanding them. Anger reveals an attachment. Fear reveals uncertainty. Jealousy reveals comparison. Embarrassment reveals the image. You are trying to protect. Each emotion becomes a messenger rather than a master. The more clearly they are seen, the less desperately they demand to be obeyed. This is not emotional distance born from indifference. It is intimacy without imprisonment. You feel deeply, yet you are no longer swept away by every inner wave. You respond instead of reacting. You choose instead of repeating. And with every quiet moment of observation, the mind discovers a strength that force could never create. Eventually, another question begins to arise on its own. If thoughts come and go, if emotions arrive and leave like changing weather, then what is this quiet presence that remains to witness them all? And perhaps even more surprising, what becomes possible when that silent presence is allowed to grow stronger than the noise surrounding it? There is a kind of noise that never reaches the ears. It begins the moment attention is pulled in a dozen different directions at once. A notification interrupts a thought. An opinion demands agreement. Another headline insists on urgency. Conversations overlap with unfinished memories. Plans for tomorrow compete with regrets from yesterday. Even in complete physical silence, the mind can become one of the loudest places on earth. Most people have grown so accustomed to this inner noise that they mistake it for normal thinking. They believe a busy mind is an active mind, and an active mind must be a healthy one. Yet activity and clarity are not the same. A lake stirred by constant wind reflects nothing clearly, no matter how much movement appears on its surface. The modern world rarely encourages stillness. It rewards speed. It celebrates constant response. Every moment seems to ask for another opinion, another decision, another reaction. If there is an empty space, something quickly rushes in to fill it. Silence has become something to escape rather than something to understand. Yet there is a quiet irony hidden within all this activity. The more information we gather, the harder it often becomes to hear our own understanding. The more voices surround us, the less familiar our own inner voice becomes. Lao Tzu looked in a different direction. He noticed that the most important things in nature do not compete for attention. A valley never announces its depth. The moon never asks anyone to admire its light. A forest does not become more alive because it is louder. Its quietness is not emptiness. It is the condition that allows life to flourish. He often spoke of what appears empty but quietly gives everything else its purpose. Cup is useful because of the space inside it, eh? Doorway serves because someone can pass through it. A window offers light because it is open again and again. He pointed toward a truth that the restless mind easily overlooks. What seems empty is often where life's greatest value is found. Silence belongs to that same hidden wisdom. It is not the absence of thought, it is the space in which thoughts stop competing long enough for understanding to emerge. Think about the moments when life has become most clear. They rarely arrive in the middle of hurried arguments or endless distraction. Clarity often appears while watching rain fall against a window, during a quiet walk with no destination, sitting alone after the world has finally settled for the night. Without warning, something that felt impossible suddenly becomes simple. Not because another answer was added, but because unnecessary noise quietly fell away. Wisdom rarely forces its way into a crowded mind. It waits. This is why silence possesses such unexpected strength. It restores perspective without demanding effort. It allows scattered attention to gather itself again. Questions that seemed impossible begin to lose their confusion. Emotions that felt overwhelming slowly reveal their true size. Problems remain, but they are no longer standing so close that they block the entire horizon. Many people search tirelessly for better answers while rarely giving themselves the conditions in which answers naturally appear. They fill every empty moment with sound, music. During every drive, a screen during every meal, conversation whenever silence begins to emerge. The habit is understandable. Silence can feel unfamiliar at first. Without constant distraction, long ignored thoughts begin to surface. Unfinished grief quietly appears. Old fears return. Hidden loneliness asks to be noticed. It is tempting to escape back into noise before these visitors have a chance to speak. But this discomfort often marks the beginning of something deeper. A room cannot be cleaned while pretending the dust does not exist. The mind follows the same principle. When silence is allowed to remain without interruption, hidden patterns slowly become visible. We notice how often we replay the same worries. We recognize how much energy is spent defending opinions that no longer matter. We begin to see the invisible, habits that quietly shape every day. These discoveries are not punishments. They are invitations only. What can be seen can truly change. This is why silence is far more practical than it appears. It is not reserved for mountaintops or secluded temples. It belongs equally to ordinary life. It exists in the few moments before opening the front door each morning, in the pause before answering a difficult message, in the quiet breath taken before responding to criticism, in the choice to listen completely before preparing the next sentence. These small spaces often carry more power than dramatic acts of will. The world teaches us that strength comes from doing more. Lao Tzu quietly suggested that strength often comes from interrupting the unnecessary, from speaking less when words add nothing, from reacting less when reaction changes nothing, from allowing the mind to become spacious enough that wisdom has somewhere to land. Over time, something subtle begins to happen. The need to constantly prove yourself becomes lighter. The urge to answer. Every criticism begins to fade. Every opinion no longer demands your agreement or your resistance. The mind stops chasing every passing thought because it has discovered something more trustworthy than endless activity. It has discovered stillness, and stillness changes perception. What once seemed urgent now appears temporary. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once looked like certainty reveals itself as assumption. The world has not changed. The one looking at it has. Perhaps this is the deepest gift of silence. It does not remove complexity from life. It simply allows us to meet complexity without becoming fragmented by it. In quietness, attention gathers instead of scattering. Understanding ripens instead of rushing. Inner strength grows almost unnoticed, not through greater effort, but through fewer unnecessary movements of the mind. Eventually, that inner quiet begins to reach beyond our private thoughts. It changes the way we listen, the way we speak, and the way we meet the people around us. Without intending to, silence starts reshaping our relationships, revealing that some of the greatest struggles between people are born not from what is said, but from the restless mind that speaks before it has truly learned to see. There is a quiet burden that many people carry without ever giving it a name. It is the feeling that they must constantly prove who they are, prove they are intelligent enough, successful enough, respected enough, strong enough. Even in moments that appear ordinary, this invisible pressure quietly shapes countless decisions. A conversation becomes a contest instead of an exchange. A disagreement feels like a threat to identity rather than an opportunity to understand. Praise brings temporary relief, while criticism lingers far longer than it should. Much of life becomes an endless effort to protect an image that can never finally be secured. The strange part is that this pursuit rarely announces itself. It hides beneath everyday habits. We explain ourselves when no explanation is needed. We compare our progress to someone else's path. We measure our worth through recognition that disappears almost as quickly as it arrives. Every approval feels valuable for a moment, then quietly asks for another. The hunger is never satisfied because it was never truly about recognition. It was about certainty. The mind hopes that if enough people admire it, question it less, or agree with it more often, then self-doubt will finally disappear. Yet certainty built on the opinions of others can never become stable. The same voices that offer praise today may withdraw it tomorrow. A reputation carefully built over years can be shaken by a single misunderstanding. When identity depends upon constant confirmation, peace becomes fragile. Lao Tzu observed something remarkably different. He noticed that nature never struggles to establish its importance. Mountains do not compare themselves with rivers. Rivers do not envy the sky. The sun does not compete with the moon. Each fulfills its own nature without asking the world for applause. There is a quiet completeness in this. Nothing tries to become more than it already is. Human beings often forget this simple wisdom. We spend enormous energy becoming visible, believing that being seen is the same as being secure. Yet visibility and stability are not the same. A flame burns brightly, attracting every eye around it. But the strongest roots grow where no one is. This is why Lao Tzu spoke so often of humility, not as weakness, not as self-denial, but as freedom from the exhausting need to defend a carefully constructed self. Humility begins with a simple realization. You no longer have to win every argument to preserve your dignity. You no longer need every misunderstanding corrected. Not every criticism deserves an answer. Not every challenge requires a demonstration of strength. Something extraordinary happens when this understanding becomes real. Energy begins returning to its rightful place. Instead of protecting an image, you begin protecting your peace. Instead of asking how you appear, you become more interested in how clearly you perceive. Instead of forcing others to acknowledge your value, you quietly begin living from it. This kind of confidence is easy to overlook because it rarely announces itself. It enters a room without demanding attention. It listens more than it speaks. It is comfortable saying, "I don't know." It does not become smaller by admitting a mistake, because its worth was never built upon appearing perfect. Many people fear humility because they confuse it with surrender. They imagine that if they stop defending themselves, others will simply take advantage of them. Yet humility is not the absence of boundaries. It is the absence of unnecessary conflict. A sturdy tree does not become weak because it no longer argues with the wind. It simply remains rooted. The same quiet strength appears in people who know themselves deeply. They do not need to dominate conversations because silence no longer feels threatening. They do not chase every opportunity to impress because they are no longer trying to convince themselves through the approval of others. They can appreciate another person's success without feeling diminished by it. They can receive criticism without allowing it to define them. They can walk away from arguments that promise nothing except more noise. This freedom cannot be purchased. It cannot be awarded, cannot be taken away. It grows only through self-understanding. The ego is always searching for evidence, evidence that it matters, evidence that it is right, evidence that it deserves more than someone else. And because it depends on endless comparison, it never truly rests. Awareness follows another path. It notices the ego without becoming trapped inside its demands. It recognizes the impulse to compete, to defend, to be admired, yet it no longer obeys every impulse that appears. Gradually, identity shifts away from reputation and toward something quieter, toward character, toward presence, toward truth. This change transforms even the smallest moments of daily life. An insult no longer determines your mood. Someone else's opinion no longer becomes your mirror. Success is enjoyed without becoming your identity. Failure is accepted without becoming your prison. You begin to discover a kind of stability that circumstances cannot easily disturb. The world often celebrates those who stand above others. Lao Tzu quietly admired those who no longer needed. That is why simplicity carries such unexpected power. A simple life leaves fewer things to defend. A simple mind carries fewer unnecessary burdens. A simple heart is not constantly calculating how it appears through the eyes of strangers. What remains is something both gentle and remarkably resilient. This quiet confidence does not need to announce itself because it is no longer searching for witnesses. It simply exists. And perhaps that has been the hidden thread connecting every step of this journey. A calmer morning, less resistance to change, a wiser relationship with emotion, the courage to welcome silence, the freedom of humility. None of these habits stand alone. Together, they begin shaping something far greater than individual moments of peace. They slowly create a mind that cannot easily be shaken, because its strength no longer depends on controlling the world, but on living in quiet harmony with it. There comes a quiet moment when a person realizes that the greatest change in life is rarely dramatic. There is no sudden awakening, no perfect morning, no final victory over fear, uncertainty, or disappointment. Instead, something far more enduring begins to take shape. The mind slowly stops fighting battles that never needed to be fought. At first, the change is almost invisible. You wake, and instead of immediately racing toward tomorrow, you allow yourself to arrive where the day has already begun. Plans change, yet you no longer spend your strength demanding that reality apologize. A wave of anger rises, but before it becomes your voice, you recognize it as only one passing movement within a much deeper awareness. Silence no longer feels empty. It becomes a place where understanding quietly gathers. The need to prove yourself softens, replaced by a confidence that asks nothing from the opinions of others. None of these moments appear extraordinary. That is precisely why they matter. The Tao has never been hidden inside extraordinary experiences. It reveals itself through ordinary ones, a single breath before speaking, a pause before reacting, the willingness to listen completely, the choice to release what cannot be controlled. A quiet morning that begins without unnecessary resistance. These moments seem too small to change a life, yet rivers shape valleys not through one powerful movement, but through countless gentle ones. The human mind changes in much the same way. Identity is not built in a single decision. It is quietly formed by the habits we return to every day. Each morning teaches the mind how to begin. Each disappointment teaches it how to respond. Each emotion teaches it whether awareness or impulse will become its guide. Each moment of silence teaches it where wisdom truly grows. Each act of humility loosens another thread in the knot of the ego. Little by little, what once felt impossible becomes natural, not because life has become predictable, because the one meeting life has changed. Many people imagine an unbreakable mind as something hard, cold, untouchable, unaffected by pain, but nature offers a different image. The oldest trees still bend with the wind, the deepest rivers still change their course around stone, the strongest mountains are shaped by rain over centuries. Nothing enduring remains rigid. Everything lasting knows how to yield without losing its nature. Lao Tzu understood that resilience is not built through endless resistance. It grows through alignment. Alignment with reality as it is. Alignment with change instead of fear. Alignment with the quiet intelligence already present beneath the restless surface of the mind. When that alignment begins to grow, something remarkable happens. The world does not suddenly become gentle. People still misunderstand you. Plans still collapse. Loss still visits every life. Uncertainty still arrives without warning. The difference is no longer found in circumstances. Is found in the space within you that those circumstances can no longer disturb so easily. Imagine a future morning. Nothing extraordinary announces itself. Perhaps an unexpected message changes your plans. Perhaps someone speaks with impatience. Perhaps the future suddenly becomes uncertain again. Months earlier, that moment might have carried you into hours of frustration, worry, or silent resistance. Now something different happens. You Notice the first wave of emotion without becoming it. You allow the disappointment to exist without turning it into a story about your entire life. You breathe, you observe, you respond. The storm still passes through. It simply no longer carries you away. That quiet difference may appear small to anyone watching from the outside. Inside, it changes everything because each time you respond with awareness instead of habit, you strengthen something deeper than confidence. You strengthen trust. Not trust that life will always unfold according to your wishes, but trust that whatever unfolds, you can meet it without losing yourself. This is the kind of strength no circumstance can easily steal. It does not depend on perfect health, perfect success, perfect relationships, or perfect certainty. It depends only on returning, again and again, to the place within that remains, steady while everything else continues to change. That return is never completed once and for all. It is practiced, not once, but every morning. Every conversation, every disappointment, every quiet walk, every difficult decision, every moment when awareness is gently chosen over automatic reaction. This is how peace grows, not as a possession, as a way of living. The Tao has always been less concerned with extraordinary achievements than with ordinary faithfulness. It asks very little, yet what it asks changes everything. Meet this moment before reaching for the next. Let go before holding tighter. Listen before speaking. Observe before reacting. Flow before forcing. These choices appear almost invisible, yet they quietly reshape the person making them. Over time, you may discover that the mind you once tried so hard to strengthen has become something altogether different, not harder, not louder, not more determined to conquer the world, simply calmer, clearer, more spacious, more at home within itself. Perhaps this is what an unbreakable mind has always been. Not a mind protected from every storm, not a mind that never feels fear or sorrow, not a mind that controls every outcome, but a mind that has stopped asking life to be different before allowing itself to be at peace. Tomorrow morning, the world will begin again. The sun will rise without asking whether anyone is ready. The wind will continue across the trees. The river will keep flowing toward the sea. And somewhere in the quiet, space before the day gathers its momentum, there will be another small choice. It may seem almost insignificant, yet within that ordinary moment lies the beginning of every lasting transformation. The journey was never leading somewhere else. It was always leading back to the quiet place within you that has been waiting patiently all along.